Yo, what's up everybody? This is Marcus from the Weekly Spot, back again with another video, and today I wanted to give my review of Reacher Season 2.
Looks like you had a rough night.
Had worse.
So in this season, we see Jack Reacher somewhere in Arkansas collecting his pension check, and when he gets his receipt, he noticed that there was some kind of embedded code that was left from Frances Neely, who was a former member of his old unit, the 110th MP Special Investigations. He contacts her and she tells him that Calvin Franz, who is another former member, was murdered by being thrown out of a helicopter somewhere in the Catskill Mountains. So Reacher meets up with Neely in New York City, and they decide to get the team back together to investigate Franz's murder. But the deeper they get into this investigation, they learn that not only are the people who killed Franz are after Reacher and the rest of his team, but they also learn that this case is much bigger than they ever could have imagined. So the first season of Reacher was amazing. I love the story, the characters, the action, etc. It was just a great season and a great way to start off the series. So of course I couldn't wait for season 2. Now the first season for the most part, had positive reactions from what I've noticed, and the second season it had more mixed reviews. But for me, watching all the episodes of season 2, I have to say that though it's not as good as season 1, I still enjoyed it. When we were introduced to Jack Reacher, we see that he's somebody that doesn't really play by the rules, and even though he does seem capable of working with others, he does often come off as like a lone wolf. But in this season it's a little different because he's working with his old team. Alan Richardson again does an amazing job as Jack Reacher. Not much to say there. I've been really liking this character, but as far as the rest of the cast goes, I think I think everyone did a good job. Now starting with the 110th, or should I say the surviving members of the 110th, we have Frances Neely, played by Maria Sten. In the book, her name was pronounced Neely, but in the show, they pronounce it Neely, which I'm just gonna stick with that because it's a little more easier for me to say. Now, this character was first introduced in the first season, played by the same actress, who we learn is like Reacher's best friend and became a private investigator sometime after the military. Neely, I think is a cool character who kind of, had a small role in season 1, so it was great seeing her again with a much bigger role in season 2. And the thing about her character is that while there are moments where she can come off as reserved and awkward at times, in particular when it comes to social interactions, she has shown to be tough, smart, and resourceful. She kind of has some similarities to Jack Reacher, but she seems to be a little more upbeat and not as stoic. She also has something called, and forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, but hapiophobia, which is a fear of being touched. Now I could be wrong, but I don't think they explain this condition directly, but it has been shown that she doesn't like physical contact through various scenes of her interactions. And I really like the friendship between Neely and Reacher. I mean, you can really tell how close they are, and despite their reserved personalities, they share a pretty deep and unspoken connection, which is evident in their interactions and the way they support each other. There's David O'Donnell, played by Sean Sipos. David is like the comic relief of the group, and when you're first introduced to him, he comes off as condescending and is known to be a womanizer and has a playboy demeanor about him. And when you see him in the present, he's still that laid-back guy. He's still got that sense of humor, but he's now a lawyer and a family man, which is a pretty big change for the character in the books. And as much as I like the book version of David O'Donnell, I thought this change was a nice addition because it gives the character more depth. And much like the book, he still has his signature weapon, which is the switchblade and the brass knuckles. I like that they kept that, and I like the character. I would say that he became another favorite of mine in the series. Lastly, we have Carla Dixon, played by Serena Swan, and much like Reacher, she's a numbers person. We see that in the present she works as a forensic accountant, while also doing some freelance jobs for various companies. She's good with mathematics. She's shown to have a keen eye for details. She's tough, she's intelligent, and she also becomes Reacher's love interest in this season. Now, with Reacher and Dixon working together, obviously there's some history there, but we learned that they built up an attraction for each other during the time that they were working together in in the military, but nothing has ever happened between the two. And when we see them together again, they still have that attraction for each other, and that sexual tension that they have for each other that eventually led to them forming a relationship. Which, I like the character, I like the relationship, and the relationship between these two, is based on unresolved feelings, not a future commitment. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm just saying that this season's romance storyline was about the past rather than the future. So despite their genuine feelings that they have for each other, they both understood that their connection won't last, though it may seem to have held such promise. But as we learn, in the first season, Jack Reacher is somebody that's not planning on, settling down or giving up wandering, at least not anytime soon. And I've seen some comments, talking about like who's better, Roscoe or Dixon. And just to throw my opinion out there, I'm gonna say Roscoe. And even after watching season 3, I mean, hey, Susan Duffy, she's cool. Dixon, is cool. But right now, I'm team Roscoe. Now, when it comes to the whole team, I do like the 1/10th. And when they all get together, things didn't start off strong at first, but over the years, they form a pretty strong sense of camaraderie, and I thought the actors worked well together. I like the chemistry. Reacher's dynamic with his team, it adds something different to the series, allowing the audience to see another side to Reacher's character, seeing him be a leader again, and at the same time, giving us flashbacks, exploring Reacher's military background and his time spent with the 1/10th. And I do hope that we see more of this team and these characters in the future. And because I'm becoming a fan of Jack Reacher, reading the books, watching this show, and after what happened to him in season 1, it's just nice to see that he still has people in his life that still care about him. He, even though the character likes being by himself, he still has friends and people that are like family to him, while also forming new relationships and new connections. So moving on from the 1/10th and talking about some other characters, this season has introduced Neely, O'Donnell, and Dixon as Reacher's new allies, but there is also another character that joins the team, and that is Gaetano Garuso, played by Dominic Lombardozzi, who is an NYPD detective who, just like Reacher and the others, is also investigating the murders of Reacher's old unit. Now, Russo I thought was a cool character. I really liked the dynamic between Russo and Reacher, and in many ways it was almost a reminiscent of Reacher's relationship with Finley in season 1. Like Finley, Russo is the good, honest, and by-the-book police detective, while Reacher, as we all know, is more like a vigilante. And when they meet, things between them start off on the wrong foot. There are a few moments of tension and hostility. Their methods sometimes come into conflict, but they do eventually find some common ground, and the gradual evolution of their relationship made them a pretty solid team. Now, as for the villains of this season, we have Shane Langston, played by Robert Patrick, a corrupt head of security for a private defense contractor. And there's AM, short for Azari Mahmoud, played by Ferdinand Kingsley, who is a weapons dealer. Now, besides Langston being this ruthless, corrupt guy, the show doesn't really do a lot with him, but much like the book, there was at least enough there to make you despise the guy. Like you couldn't wait for Reacher to get his hands on him. And Robert Patrick, I thought, did a fine job playing the character. Ferdinand Kingsley, I thought, also did a good job as an AM. This character is something like a ghost or a chameleon as he travels around the world with almost no trace, with different aliases. And I gotta say that in comparison to the villains, I do like AM more. I would even say that he kind of overshadows Langston because of his ruthlessness and the deception and the mysterious nature of AM. Like, I was more interested in him than Langston because of how they were setting his character up. But again, much like the book, it fell off in the end. Because yeah, while the show does give us a satisfying end to the character in the context of the story, at the same time I couldn't help but feel a little underwhelmed. And maybe that's on me for having these expectations of what's going to happen, which I guess I shouldn't be surprised because I did read the book and the same thing happens there, but with one big difference, which I would say is worse than what happened in the book. But because of the changes that they made with this show, like you see with most adaptations, I was kind of thinking, well, I was kind of hoping that they would do something different. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, and I don't know if I said this in my review for Bad Luck and Trouble, but the villains, while I don't, hate them, like I don't think they're terrible, I don't think they're, great either. Like they're okay, they're decent villains, but if I gotta be honest, they were the weakest part of that book, and they're also the weakest part of this season. Now, when it comes to the accuracy, since this is based on the book of Bad Luck and Trouble, which is the 11th book of the series, the first season, which is based on the first book, Killing Floor, was pretty accurate for the most part. As for this, I would say that there are more changes here. There are some changes to the plot, some of the characters and locations, but while season 2 doesn't follow the book as closely as season 1, I do think that it's pretty close in most regards. Like, I don't think it's strayed too far from the source material. I thought this season looked good. The action scenes were good. I enjoyed the story. It was pretty engaging all the way through. The writing of season 1, I don't know if I would go as far to say that it's like a masterpiece or anything like that, but for what it was still pretty good. This season I don't think is on that same level as the first, but I still think it's okay. Like I said before, not everybody is crazy about this season, and yeah, I can admit that the writing, it is a bit repetitive. It's it's cliche, cheesy, and there are some unrealistic and ridiculous moments. The first season had them too, like, don't get me wrong, but the first season seemed to be a little more grounded in comparison, so I can understand why people would have a problem with this, and usually these things would bother me too. But I don't know, for something like this, it doesn't really bother me as much, because in this defense, besides that, I was honestly having fun with this. The Jack Reacher book series, it's a series that takes itself serious, but not too serious, if that makes sense. And this season, and really this show, it's no different, but I can understand that this may not be for everybody. I mean, you can say that about anything, but still, like, I get it, because it is silly and it can be over the top, but for me, it's at least fun. And even the show knows it. Like, it makes fun of itself sometimes. I do like the self-awareness, because it not only adds to the humor, but also establish how, the show is aware of some of the ridiculousness and some of the familiar character tropes it portrays. Like, there was a moment where David O'Donnell says that Guy Russo reminds him of that angry, pissed off detective that you see in the movies, which he really is. And then there's a Jack Reacher himself, where the show brings up or makes jokes about his size and his questionable superhuman strength. When I reviewed the first season in some of the books, I mentioned many times that Reacher is a superhuman being. Like, for example, there's a scene, and this scene is in the trailer, by the way, but there's a scene where Reacher sees a guy in his car watching him and his team, and Reacher, thinking that this person's one of the bad guys, walks up to him and kicks the front bumper of his car so hard that the airbag went off. Now, I can be wrong, but in real life, it would take a great deal of force for an airbag to go off, so I would think that it's unlikely that someone could pull that off. And there are more moments in this season that are way more ridiculous than that, especially in the finale. But because I was having so much fun watching this, I'm able to kind of look past some of these things. And not to give away the finale, but it does involve a helicopter, and that's all I will say there. This season, for what it is, I think that while it's not as good as the first season, it was still a fun watch. The villains, while they weren't terrible, they really were the only thing for me that was the weakest part of the season. But I really enjoyed the story, the characters, and the action. I would say that this is one of those shows where people would say that you would have to turn your brain off, which is probably not the best wording, but I feel like with something like Reacher, that's something that you will have to do and try to enjoy for what it is. Otherwise, you're not gonna have a good time. And try is really the key word, because I've seen some movies and shows that are so ridiculous. Some I couldn't even finish, they were so bad. So even I have my limits. And something like Reacher, while it is ridiculous, it's also fun. This show kind of feels like a throwback to the classic straightforward action thrillers. But again, I can understand if other people don't feel the same. And the last thing that I want to say is that as much as I like Bad Luck and Trouble is one of my favorite books in the series, this honestly would not have been my first choice for season 2. And not that I have like a big problem with them, using this story for their season 2, but after watching this, I was thinking, maybe they could have saved this story for like maybe the later seasons. I mean, we don't know how many seasons this show is gonna have, but I don't know, that's just how I feel. But overall, it's not as strong as season 1, but it's still a solid season, and I will give Reacher season 2 a 4 out of 5.
Need a new jacket.
What's wrong with the one you just bought?
It has blood on it.
Now that is it for this video and my review for Reacher Season 2, and let me know what you think. This is Marcus from the Weekly Spot. More content will be coming out soon, but until then, take care everyone.